Hi, this is Jeannie Yegley, the Director of Marketing at Survey Analytics, and welcome to our webinar. We're sorry if we may have inconvenienced you by canceling last week, but we still wanted to get this important presentation forward to you. So I'm going to go ahead and introduce Andrew Jeavons, who is the CEO at Survey Analytics, and he will be presenting the evolution of millennials and data privacy.
Hi everyone, I'd like to repeat Gina's apology for cancelling the webinar. Sorry, some circumstances that I couldn't control meant that I couldn't do the webinar. And thanks very much for taking the time to watch this now. So we're going to look at evolution of millennials and data privacy. Now, privacy has become a hot issue, of course, now in relation to the web. But one of the things that crossed my mind, did we ever really have privacy? If you go back to the past, when there were things like telegrams, nice picture of a Western Union telegram there, a telegram might contain very important, very personal news, but it was read by the person who sent the telegram to the receiving station. It was then transcribed, who read it. The guy who delivered it probably read it, so it really wasn't that private. And going back to old-style telephone exchanges, it was very possible for the telephone operator to listen in to whatever calls were going on. And there used to be things called party lines, if you're old enough to remember those, where two households shared one telephone line. And it was not uncommon to pick up the telephone and hear somebody else speaking, and you could, if you're really sneaky, just not put the telephone back down on the hook and listen to whatever was going on. Letters. Were letters really private? It's really easy to steam open a letter, read it, put it back in the envelope, and nobody will know that you've done that. So they are really not that private if somebody's really intent on finding out what's in there. And let's think about credit cards. How often have you given your credit card to a server in a restaurant who's then gone off with it to the back or wherever the processing machine is, done whatever they wanted to do, and brought it back? They could have copied it, they could have done any number of things to it. So the notion that we have some sort of very private society before the advent of the web is really a little bit of a myth. Our conversations and transactions have always been shared in one way or another, even if we didn't realize it. But as I said, for some reason with the web, the panic button on privacy has become hot. Everybody's talking about it. And of course, the recent revelations by Snowden about the NSA and the monitoring of conversations have really served to bring this to the forefront in the past few weeks. I'm going to discuss a paper by this guy called Sebastian Sether, I think that's how you say his name, from the very Journal of Personal Cyber Consciousness, Concepts of Privacy in a Post-Human Age. One of his interesting comments is that thus in the future we'll be likely be discussing privacy intrusions involving senses and types of information which we haven't conceived of. And of course, 30 or 40 years ago, the idea that our location would be anything other than private was unheard of. GPS on telephones simply didn't exist. Mobile phones really didn't exist in the form they are now. And so the idea that we could actually have our location shared was wholly unknown. Yet now this has become an issue. Sether also talks about, what do we really want to prevent? Do we want to stop others from observing us? Do we want really to stop them from stalking us? Deceive others about our health, or avoid discrimination based on superstitions about genes? I mean, there is this whole thing with insurance companies about whether or not they should have access to our genetic information. Stop others from using information about you without your consent, or stop others from using information about you that conflicts in your values. Do we want to disappear without a trace, live our old life and begin afresh? Are we interested in really depriving the police of crime-fighting tools, or do we think that it's some sort of safeguard against democracy? And do we want to wear masks? Do we want to fool others about our true identity? Sether also says, thus is the abolition of privacy the key to a truly integrated society. And he makes the point that in the past, when we were worried about intrusions on our privacy, we were really thinking of Big Brother type intrusion, that is, of the state, a monolithic again, in a way reminiscent of 1984 and Big Brother observing us all as individuals. Now we have more sort of democratized surveillance, as he says. It's really surveillance by social networks. With all the online sharing of information, we're really being watched by all our friends and maybe people who aren't our friends, as much as by the state or some monolithic entity. When we did our privacy study, which we're going to be talking about a bit more later, we looked at the top 5 things that people would consider to be private, and they're remarkably similar for the under and over 30s: social security number, location, income, our actual contact information, our address, and interestingly, our DNA profile. Again, 30 or 40 years ago, there would be no concept that our DNA profile would be anything other than private. The technology simply didn't exist in those days for DNA profile information to be freely available. But with companies like 23andMe, you can get a lot of information about your DNA relatively cheaply, and that means that it could be made available. So in the future, we're likely to see things that we really can't conceive of now about ourselves becoming an issue in terms of privacy. And in this way, privacy is evolving as the information available to be private or public evolves over time. So let's look at millennial dissonance. More than 50% of millennials would give personal private information in exchange for an incentive. Pay us and we'll give you some information. People over 30 are more worried about their personal information on the internet becoming public, and the over 30s do feel that there's oversharing. And we hear a lot about this in people thinking that people just really do share too much. When we asked millennials and the over 30s, which is, we classify the age groups, millennials have much higher number of friends on social media profiles. And it must be remembered that in the middle-aged group, Facebook is really just as popular among middle-aged people as it is among younger people. It just seems that millennials are much more likely to connect to a number of people. But it's also interesting that when we asked, the different age groups, have you ever removed your information from a social media account? The boomers, the older people, around 28% of people have done that, whereas the under 30s were up at 41%. And this shows that, millennials are much more able, or feel much more able, to delete their profiles. Is it because they really don't regard these people they're connected to as true friends, that they really regard them as expendable? And that really is quite interesting. When we look at location sharing and ask, to share your location with friends and family, again, we find the under 30s are more likely to do that. Not quite such a big difference between the age groups here. Are you confident sharing your location with businesses and employees? It's the same amongst the age groups, that the vast majority of people are no, and the percentages are, for the millennials, just a little lower than for the over 30s boomer population. The majority of both age groups, though, however, have geolocation services running on mobile devices. And that seems to be a bit of a paradox, in that on the one hand you're running these services which are handing out geolocation information, but it seems they have little or no understanding of the technology on what data is being shared, because most people don't seem to want to share their locations. And there is a bit of a crossroads on privacy here. There is a concept of Generation C coming in, which is not necessarily millennials. It's people who are really very closely integrated with social media and use that social media and online resources very, very heavily. Millennials are the first generation to grow up surrounded by mobile technology and social media, which is very true. Previous generations really weren't so immersed in the internet, although it existed. Millennials appear to live in the moment, and the vast majority of them are always connected via mobile devices and apps around the clock. Speaking as the father of a millennial, sleeps with the phone next to her. And I think that's very common among that age group. Now, when we go down to the teenagers, 75% between the age of 20 into mobile internet users, 37% of that age group have their own smartphone, and that's up from 23% and 1 in 14 is on tablet devices. So they really are very highly connected. And that then therefore means as this generation goes forward and another generation comes in below them, there'll be over higher levels of connectivity. These following sets of information by the UNC Annenberg Center for Digital Future survey in April 2013, which I recognize you looking at. There's a whole new set of values they concluded being driven by millennials in their online behavior. They say they're happy to wait to give away their online privacy in return for incentive, but they say they're not happy to do it, but they are happy to do it. And this is a sort of a rift between what they actually will do and what they say they will do. In essence, privacy for this age group appears to be for sale. Millennials seem to perceive social media as an exchange or an economy of ideas where sharing involves participating in smart ways. And it is this participation and sharing that seems particularly important for this age group. But then, of course, there is always the what they will say in surveys is that they don't like this kind of private information being shared. Now, if you look at consumers, you see that 2/3 of them don't trust online companies like Facebook, even though we interact with them and share our personal information with them. And this, again, is this idea that on the one hand, we'll say we don't want to have private information shared, but we do actually do it quite a lot. We've got to change the way to collect feedback and insights that we need for research. We must focus on keeping our customers and employees happy. We have to work on credibility and make millennials and other generations feel content in sharing their information that it's private. And of course there are all sorts of initiatives certifying privacy, what's called PI2, personal identifiable information. And this, I think, is simply going to increase in terms of there's going to be more of a drive to have a pact between the people we want to find information about and, you know, us as data collectors. We have to be much more open and transparent and upfront about what we do with the data. And of course now millennials and indeed the older generations do now understand that their data has value. I mean, 20 or 30 years ago, people really didn't have any concept of giving incentives for telephone interviews, in fact. You know, if you look at the fact you call people up, say, will you spend 20 minutes talking to me? And a lot of the time people would say, yeah, sure, fine. And there was no concept of giving people incentives to complete surveys. Of course, now that's a core part of web surveying and mobile surveys is that you give an incentive. People perceive that their information has value. And so if their information has value, we have to structure the transaction, the business arrangement between the people we want to get information from and us as data gatherers. And part of that contract, if you like, is going to be a specification of privacy rules that we have, security, and what we will do with the data. I'd like to talk for a moment about survey analytics. The company that I'm CEO of, we offer a set of information collection and analysis tools. We can perform online surveys, mobile data surveys, analytics and data visualization. And there are some of our trademarks. Survey Pocket is our tablet software. It works on or offline. Survey Swipe is our online smartphone interviewing software, which will give you such facilities as geofencing, geolocational triggers for surveys, that's that kind of stuff. Second, Prism is our data visualization system for tablets. Life Metrics is a passive data collection system that works on the smartphones, and our panel system for building panels of consumers. This is an example of some of our clients: McGraw-Hill, Bose, Liberty Mutual, ranging from game manufacturers to drug manufacturers all the way to Microsoft, as you know, who are a small software company. One of the things we've been focusing on, and one of the ways of structuring the relationship between people who have the data and us and the people who want to get it, is to use an online panel. And the advantages of an online panel is it allows you to build a relationship with the consumer. It allows you to collect lots of information in terms of demographics and profiling that can then be used in analysis. and it's a custom branded panel. It's a good way to keep a steady stream of information flowing to your organization from motivated individuals. We can create a rewards-driven mobile panel. As I said, this reward is now an essential part of that transaction in gathering data. Panelists can download the application onto their smartphones. It's very easy to segment panel members. We can send push notifications saying that there's a panel available, there's a survey available for you because you qualify for this survey based on your demographics. All the surveys can be triggered by a location if the individual agrees to do that. There is a whole process of getting the consent of individuals. We can't just track people's location without them knowing. Our panel management software allows you to build, recruit, and manage your self-service and online panels. You don't have to have a third-party panel provider. It's very economical, allows you to collect a lot of data at relatively low cost. And panels really are, we feel, a really good way of ensuring that you get high quality data from motivated individuals rather than by using a sample company. If you have any questions about our software or this webinar, we'll be very happy to answer them. And I believe Jean is going to add something more about how you can ask us questions about this. Thanks for your time.
Thank you, Andrew. Great presentation, and thank you for tuning in. Since this is not a live session, if you have any questions, if you are viewing on our website, you can ask them right on the embedded form. And if you are watching this directly on YouTube, you can go ahead and leave questions in the comments, and we'll be more than happy to address those. Thank you for joining us.